Let's take a look at the AppV sequencer and do some AppV sequencing now. So you want to browse to the sequencer, which you can find in your start menu. Now, the first dialog will actually look pretty similar to the old version if you use that. But I can assure you that the actual packaging or sequencing wizard rather is vastly different because Microsoft really standardized this version. It eliminated some of the different options, and that's a good thing because that also lends itself to automation. Uh, Microsoft also took the step to make this completely PowerShell driven, which again lends itself very well to automation. But I digress. Let's focus on just looking at some of the different options here in the AppV sequencer. So create accelerator is still there from the old version. So an accelerator is basically like an application-based template. So you might have an application that might have been particularly difficult, required you to set up some exclusions, or yada yada yada, and you decided to create an accelerator. So the next time someone had to do that package or a new version, they could use that accelerator and not have to worry about making any of those configurations. The beauty about accelerators is the AppV online community on TechNet actually uploads some very useful accelerators. So if you find yourself just getting started into sequencing, it's a good idea to look at TechNet to see if there's accelerators for the applications that you're about to sequence. Similarly, there's also recipes. A recipe is like a very detailed step-by-step instruction on how to sequence a certain application. And that's good because some applications actually require a lot of tweaking and configuration to get them to work as a virtual application. So it really saves a lot of pain for you if you just go over to TechNet and look for those recipes and those accelerators before you start sequencing. So let's take a look at the options. You can see the Scratch directory. That's really just a temp directory for storing certain files during the sequencing. For example, icon files for shortcuts get stored in that temporary directory during the sequence. The three checkboxes underneath. The first one is allow Microsoft Update to run during monitoring, and that's unchecked by default, which is good because we actually turned off the service for Windows updates because we don't want that to run as a background process and add files to our package that are unwanted. But in some circumstances, maybe you have a Microsoft application and you want to sequence that. But it might be an old installer and there's been some updates to it since you got that source vendor media. So maybe you want to, during the sequence, install the application and then check for updates. And then let the Windows updates update the application for you. In that case, it might be useful to allow the updates to run. Append package version to the file name. So that's going to append a 1, a 2, a 3. So it increments each time you save your application. I like that. It's just visually, I like to know what package build version that I'm working on. And the last one is to always trust the source of package accelerators. So again, that's about accelerators. And obviously, to trust the source, since people can download these accelerators, do you trust the source? Do you trust the packagers to use a reliable accelerator? And that's what that is. So the parse items shows you a list of every directory in the file system and in the registry that AppV sequencer will be monitoring. So it's going to monitor these areas for any file changes and registry changes. And anything it detects being changed in those directories or those reg hives will be included in your sequence package of your application. Exclusion items are the directories that's not going to be monitored. Typically, these include kind of noise areas like cookies, for example, and history. That's never going to be something you really require to capture an application. That's noise. Other examples of excluded directories might be some certain user-specific directories. And the reason you would exclude those is because you don't necessarily want files for the person who's doing the sequencing to be included in a package that goes to everybody. It might, for example, they go to a dialog screen and it shows the user's name or something like that. You may want it so that the first time the user launches the application, it just writes those user files for them as needed. Okay. The only other thing is you can save templates and load templates as well. And there's also these helpful hyperlinks, all very similar to the previous version. So let's go ahead and let's start sequencing. So I'm going to create a package because I'm not using a package accelerator because I want to go through all the steps with you. Prepare the computer for creating a virtual package. So this actually runs a quick diagnostics test. So for example, if I didn't have Windows Defender stopped and disabled, it would actually warn me here to say, oh, Windows Defender is running, Windows Search is running. And it would stay like that. If I stopped the service and then hit refresh, it would show this dialog screen. And this dialog, where it's not flagging anything, states the machine should be good for creating our virtual package. Okay, so this is similar to the previous version. It gives you 3 different options. So there's standard application, which is the default. That's your run-of-the-mill standalone application. An add-in or plugin, which is like a Microsoft add-in. And also a middleware, so like Visual C++ redistributable. So this is a standalone application. This is a text editor that I'm going to be looking at right now. Now I can select the installer for the application, or I can perform a custom installation. I always perform a custom installation because I like to be in control of the snapshot or the capture process. Okay, so it wants a virtual package name. So I'm going to call this Helios text pad, and I'm going to give it a version 7. Now it wants a virtual application directory, which is basically the folder directory to where I'm going to install my application. So let's say this is going to go to program files x86. Okay. So I'm going to take a copy of that and I'm going to hit next. So what it's doing here is it's taking the initial snapshot of your machine. So it's checking all those directories that we saw in the parse items to see what's currently there. And now it's prompting me to carry out the installation of the application that I want to create into a virtual application. So I'm going to run the installer. So we could see extracting an MSI. Okay, let's go through the installations. This is nothing special. It's just a regular installation. Now, I'm going to change this to what I set the directory to. Okay, let's hit next and install. So I'll fast forward at this point just to get through the installation. Okay, my installation is done. So I'm actually going to go ahead and take this option to launch the program. Okay, and I'm happy I did because I don't want this to show up. So I'm going to uncheck that and I'm going to hit close. Okay. Everything looks pretty good to me. Okay, let's say that's okay. And let's close out. Now I'm going to hit I am finished installing. If I had selected the other monitoring option, it would have automatically launched the installer for me. Whereas where I had said I want more control, so I checked to do a custom installation. That's why I did that. I want to browse to my own installer and carry out the installation. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. And now it's checking those directories again that we saw in the parse items, and it's trying to see what's changed between the last time it took a snapshot. Okay, so we could see that it's picked up on two executables. So there's the portable wizard and there's also the text pad. And on this dialog, it's run each program to manage the first use tasks. So I actually already did that, and that's a kind of a force of habit for myself. So here's where you could typically just launch it for the first time to make sure there's no dialog screens or pop-ups, and if there was, you could suppress them to make sure that they don't show up, and that would capture into your application. I already did that, so I'm going to go forward. Portable wizard, I don't think that's something that I want to include. I'm just concerned with the text pad editor. Okay, it's collecting the differences again. All right, so let's click next here, and I'm going to click customize so I could show you guys everything that's going on. Okay. Okay, so here we could see our executables again. Now this one is to optimize. So a new option from that wasn't in the previous version is this little checkbox down here, which forces the application to be fully downloaded before launching, which is recommended for slow and WAN networks. And I personally like it as an option for large applications also. So what it means is when a user's client goes back to the server and it sees an application and brings it down and you check this box here, instead of waiting for the user to click to launch it, to bring it down from the server, it's actually going to automatically just start to preload in the background unbeknownst to the user. So I'm not going to check that because this is a relatively small application. I'm going to click on TextPad and I'm going to run selected. And what this is going to do, it's still going to optimize it for streaming. And what it's going to do is it's going to capture whatever actions I carry out here. So if I bring up these menus, for example, those menus should now be available right away. The first time the application launches, and the first instance that launches with this dialog screen or with this box, with this window, those menus should be available. And you see, because AppV streams, particularly for say like larger applications, you might click on it to launch the application and it's still streaming in the background. So a user might go and click on something and it hasn't streamed that part of the application yet, so it doesn't appear. So this ensures that whatever we want to appear right away will appear right away. And typically, I'm not sure if it's changed, to be honest with you, in AppV version 5, but typically it was anything up to like 40% of the application could be like that quick pre-cache. Okay, so let's hit next. Okay, so what operating systems do I want to allow this to run on? I can allow it to run on any operating system, or I can lock it down to a certain operating system, like, for example, Windows 7 64-bit. Now I could say, well, I've only sequenced this on Windows 7 64-bit, so I only want it to work on Windows 7 64-bit. Or I could say I've got 32-bit and 64-bit Windows 7 in my environment, so I want to test it on that. For now, I'm just going to allow it to run on any operating system. Okay, rather than save the package now, I'm actually going to continue to modify the package without saving, just so I could show you guys all the examples. Okay, so it's got a warning for us here in the report that certain files were excluded. And if we look at this, it all looks like it's all like metadata and files that aren't a concern to me. So I'm going to close. And I'm going to close this. Now this looks somewhat familiar if you use the previous version. You could put in descriptions, for example, let's say sequenced by Rory Monahan. If I wanted to change my package name, I could do that here. In deployment, you can see there's a lot less here to configure than in the old versions. If you wanted to change the operating systems it could work on, you've got that option here again. Change history won't be populated right now, but if I had saved it, all that information would get populated. This is the virtual registry, so this is the registry that has been captured. Now you could go through this, and it's a good idea to look for hard-coded paths, especially with your username or the machine name. So, for example, check out my name. Doesn't look like there's any references. Okay. For the sake of speed, let's go through and we'll look at the package files. We'll see if there's anything in here that's worth excluding. So we saw during the installation that it extracted and it was using an MSI. So a good idea is to set up an exclusion for the Windows installer location before you start sequencing, or if you notice that it's putting down these sorts of folders, you can just go in here and delete them, and that'll delete it out of your package. I could be a lot more granular here and go through and remove a lot more, but for the sake of speed, I'm not going to do that right now. Virtual services, there's no virtual services. If your application had a service, it should get captured in there. This is new for this version of AppV. So there's an option to allow all named objects to interact with the local system and also to allow COM objects to interact with the local system. So by checking those boxes, if those components, those types of components exist in your application, it allows for those and those only to kind of run in a non-isolated mode. So it allows them system access, which is good because it will ensure functionality of your applications. Okay, so we can see shortcuts in FTAs, FTAs being file type associations. Now I said I don't really want this portable wizard, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove that. Now I've got file type associations for Helios TextPad. Do I want that or do I not? That's up to you. I'll leave it in for now. Okay, and I'm going to go to edit, and I can see it's pointing to the textpad.exe, and it's going to, my shortcut name is going to show up as textpad, and the version is 7070. I could change the icon here if I wanted, which I don't. And that should be okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save my application now. So at this point, you should save your application to a shared folder. And this shared folder should be visible or should be readable from all the users or for all the users that receive AppV applications. So just like the content share in AppV version 4.6, this would be a share that your applications are going to live on. For now, I'm just going to save this to my desktop. Okay. Okay, that's saved, so I'm going to close out. And again, this is just my stupid force of habit here. I could have saved it to the share, but I didn't. I like to save it to my machine first. I think it's, well, it's not quicker, but I like to save to my desktop. That way, if I log into my virtual machine and I see a folder on there, I know that I need to revert it. I know it's kind of stupid, but that's just the way I do things. Stupid. Okay. So I've got that on my content share now. So that's my virtual application. So let's move on to test it.